All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited that you've joined us for the Justice Education series hosted by the Petey Greene Program. And I think that we're in for a really great panel tonight. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Siobhan Cook, and I'm the Volunteer Engagement and Organizational Learning Manager here at the Petey Greene Program. As many of you already know, the PGP is the largest multi-state provider of tutoring and college readiness programs in carceral and reentry spaces. In addition to the work that we do providing educational support and workforce development to currently and formerly incarcerated people, we are also committed to providing our volunteers and the wider community with the tools needed to understand the broader impacts of the carceral system. It's our hope that we play a small role in connecting volunteers with the broader movement for change. One way that we accomplish this is through programming like tonight's Justice Education series, reaching out letters and correspondence in carceral spaces. In this Zoom webinar, we can't see or hear y'all, but you should be able to use the chat and Q&A. We're going to spend about 50 minutes hearing from our panelists and then open it up to audience questions. So feel free to put those in the Q&A throughout or in the chat, and we'll make sure that we leave time for those. Here at the PGP, we recognize the need for connection with our students. We understand that too often incarcerated folks are dehumanized and othered in mainstream society, and we work to push back on that through meaningful, person-centered academic support. However, the need for connection when faced with the isolation of the prison system goes well beyond academic spaces. People need connection to their friends, their family, and their wider community, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. We'll hear from 4 amazing panelists with insight on the topic of correspondence from a variety of perspectives. And I'm going to briefly introduce each of them before allowing them to kind of take the reins and tell us a little bit more about the work that they do. So to start us off, Marlise Talley is the founder and project coordinator of Lifelines to Solitary at Solitary Watch, a national pen pal project connecting incarcerated people with outside support. A longtime advocate for the abolition of solitary confinement with over a decade of experience in nonprofit project management and advocacy, she has led programs and facilitated multi-sector partnerships that provide critical support to people impacted by the criminal legal system. And then we have Jess Abulafia, who's an educator and abolitionist whose work centers on the voices of people impacted by the U.S. prison industrial complex. She manages the Prison Writing Mentorship Program at PEN America and oversees most correspondence with incarcerated writers. Jess has taught memoir writing at Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women and collaborated on book projects with system-impacted individuals, including memoirs, art anthologies, and reentry resources. And we have with us also April Fung, who's the CEO of Ameelio, a technology nonprofit that builds software to combat mass incarceration, an economist by training and internationally recognized leader in civic innovation. April has worked extensively for governments in the US and the UK. She has spearheaded efforts to include incarcerated individuals and their families in the implementation of the historic bipartisan infrastructure law, the IIJA, on state and national stages, leveraging a once in a generation opportunity to address structural failures in the criminal legal system. And then I want to take a second to introduce a fourth panelist who I hope will be joining us shortly. But Audrey Wilson is the New Jersey Divisional Manager here at the Petey Greene Program. Her lived experience as a justice impacted individual drew her to the Petey Greene Program's work on educational and social justice. Incarcerated at 22, she earned her associate's and bachelor's degrees while working as a tutor and teaching assistant in the educational department while inside. Upon her release, she went on to earn her master's degree from Rutgers University, focusing on the many societal barriers that impact successful reentry. So, I'm really excited to just kind of dive right in, and I'm going to give each of y'all a few minutes to just describe the work that you do, and share kind of brief overview of your organization and or how you came to this work. So, Marlies, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with these amazing panelists. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm really grateful to Siobhan and her team for inviting me. Thank you so much. So again, my name is Marlies Talley. I run Lifelines to Solitary, which is a pen pal program run by Solitary Watch. Solitary Watch is a nonprofit newsroom leading original investigative journalism about the issue of solitary, as well as storytelling projects to amplify the voices of people held in solitary. And also, finally, and most importantly, to educate the public about what solitary confinement is and what it does to people subjected to it. Um, Lifelines, as a pen pal project under the umbrella of Solitary Watch, connects volunteers with people held in solitary confinement in prisons and jails. Most of the people we match are in 23 to 24-hour isolation, sometimes for months or even years, sometimes decades. It's worth noting here that the United Nations says that the international limit of solitary is 15 days before it's called torture. Most of the people we match, again, are in this very, very difficult, isolated space. They're not allowed any visits or any human interaction, and one of the only ways they're able to maintain contact with the outside world is through letters. So I came to this work through a deep interest in the prison system. I've been involved with activism around solitary confinement for many years, and about 15 years ago, I started this project with the incredible woman who runs Solitary Watch, Jean Casella. I've also been interested in the prison system for a long time. I've always, even as a kid, been very interested in freedom and in safety and what those ideas mean to people. And as an adult, I became very interested in conditions of confinement. So not just confinement or incarceration itself, but the experience of it and how it differs and varies. Um, so I'll just tie this very quickly to an experience I had. I decided to study incarceration in graduate school and conducted an ethnographic study of a prison, which I visited weekly for 8 months. There was a wing of this prison that differed from the other wings. It was like small, housing about 10 men, and it was an experiment for the prison staff. The men put in this wing would get more privileges than the men in other wings. They could move more freely around the prison. They could hang out in the common space. They could shower when they wanted to. And I wanted to study this wing because I became obsessed with the question, what does freedom mean in a place of deliberate unfreedom? And what does freedom mean when it's presented as a reward for obedience? Because, of course, the way that these men got to the wing was by being good, right? By adhering to the rules of the prison. And what I ended up realizing was that the importance of freedom for these men wasn't individual, it was relational. The key difference in their confinement wasn't that they saw themselves as more autonomous, making micro decisions for themselves throughout the day that they couldn't otherwise make, but of course that was important. But the key difference was about relationality. So the extra freedoms granted to them meant they could hang out with each other, they could socialize, they could play cards, they could cook together, they could watch TV together, they could counsel each other, they could look at each other's family photos. And every man talked about this when I asked about autonomy and freedom, the questions pointed me somewhere different. So increased freedom within this prison translated to the freedom to have community. And so to me, there's a strong connection between this realization and the Pen Pal project, because prison, especially solitary, means deprivation of many kinds, and deprivation of community and relationality is a key part of imprisonment. Relationality, more than anything else, affects someone's sense of stability and belonging. And one of the only freedoms that solitary confinement allows, at least in theory, is correspondence. So, in other words, that one freedom translates to a sense of being connected to someone else in a space designed to make you feel more alone than you ever have. That's sort of how I got to this work.
Thank you, Marlies. Jess, you want to tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how you got started in it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone, I'm Jess, and I came to this work specifically with the background in prison education. So, as Siobhan mentioned, I've taught memoir writing at Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey, and over the past few years, I've collaborated very closely with currently and formerly incarcerated people on several different book projects. And currently, I'm the mentorship coordinator at Penn America's Prison and Justice Writing Program. So, the program itself was founded in the wake of the Attica prison riots in the mid 70s and has since supported thousands of incarcerated writers across the country for over 50 years, housed in any kind of carceral facility. So, prisons, jails, immigration detention centers, any kind of facility. Right now, the program is small but very, very collaborative. It's just run by two full-time staff, myself and my colleague Malcolm Tariq, one part-time consultant, Peter Dunn, and then some interns and our volunteer community, of course. And none of that would be possible without them. And so the heart of the program is essentially providing resources, mentorship, and audiences to justice involved writers while also raising public consciousness about mass incarceration in the United States. And we have several different initiatives to do this work. So the first one is our writing handbook. I have a copy right here. It's called The Sentences That Create Us. And we distribute this inside to people for free. We've distributed over 50,000 copies so far. And it's also accompanied by a curriculum and other educational materials for people to run writing workshops, either with an outside facilitator or self-directed inside. So this, I would say, is one of our most popular resources. It's very widely distributed. I've used it in my own, workshops inside. And so we distribute this as part of our programming. We also have the Incarcerated Writers Bureau, which is our newest online resource slash website. And it connects incarcerated writers with industry professionals through best practices for ethical collaboration. It has a submission hub of accessible, creative, and professional opportunities for people to submit their work, and a searchable roster of experienced incarcerated writers who have worked with publishers and editors in the past. So it's a way to directly connect them with writers on the outside, basically. And then we have our two foundational initiatives that started this program decades ago, the annual Penn Prison Writing Awards and the Penn Prison Writing Mentorship Program, which is, again, what I manage. So for the mentorship program, we pair writers on the inside with writers on the outside, and we facilitate their one-on-one mail correspondence. So the entire mentorship experience takes place basically through the mail, whether it's physical mail or the prison email channels, which I'm sure we'll discuss later. And so the letters between the mentors and mentees feature a range of different things, but a lot of it is constructive feedback on writing, craft guidance, and setting goals around long-term writing, goals and what they want to accomplish within the program and beyond. And so a lot of the pairings have been established for many, many years. They correspond, they develop friendships through the program. So it starts as a writing relationship, but then of course, through the nature of the letters, they become deep friends, and they sustain their correspondence for years. That's pretty common within the program. And essentially, it helps writers build a sustained writing practice and bridges incarcerated writers to the broader literary community and public discourse. And so basically, Penn is a literary organization, but PJW specifically focuses on incarcerated people in the US. And I came to this work in college, honestly. Like it sounds cliche, but education for me personally, like truly changed my life. And my professors at college, the classes I took at college, they really shaped my understanding of the prison system and incarcerated people. I was lucky enough to take a lot of amazing classes that centered incarcerated people themselves and their experiences and their work. And that deeply shaped how I come to this work and also understand the system and people housed inside of it. And my particular interest was tracking the parallels between enslavement and current day mass incarceration. So a lot of my research in school centered around drawing those, historical lines between American chattel slavery and our modern day prison system, and then eventually coming to the understanding, at least in my belief, that the current system is just an extension and modern day form of enslavement. And so that's kind of my orientation to this work. But through my work at Penn and corresponding to incarcerated people every day, like I just learned so much just through the mail. And when I first started at Penn, before I managed the mentorship program, I was just doing mail. So everything that gets submitted to our contest mentorship program, it all comes through the mail, and we get hundreds of letters every week. So I just learned a lot just by opening mail. And I think that's one of the best ways that you can learn about the system, because even just the process of doing mail itself teaches you so much about how the system really is built to conceal, confine, disrupt lines of communication. And that all comes through handwritten mail. So I'm really honored to be on this panel. I'm excited for the discussion to come.
Thanks so much, Jess. And April, will you do the same?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone. April Fang here. I'm the CEO of Ameelio. Really, really excited for this conversation. Ameelio is a technology nonprofit, and we build and deploy technologies, both software and hardware for incarcerated individuals and their families, and also outside resource providers. So specifically what that looks like is that we build video conferencing, voice calls, e-messaging, basically the communication platform that enables all of those modes of communication. And then we deploy the technology so that incarcerated individuals, either it's in a state prison or a county jail or juvenile facility, connect with their families and loved ones, and then also, legal providers, medical providers, educators on the outside. Specifically, what really sets Ameelio apart, and then I'll say a little bit more about our founding story, is that we believe that communication between incarcerated individuals and their families and loved ones or educators should be at no cost to the end users. And so we provide all of those technologies at no cost to the end user, but we work directly with the government agency, either as the Department of Corrections or a sheriff's office, to essentially provide those services. So the founding story of Ameelio was, data back to about 5.5 years ago at this point. Our co-founders were students at Yale University at that point, and they had families and friends incarcerated themselves, and having to communicate with their friends, having to pay really high costs, right, to maintain those connections is what started Ameelio. Because the idea is that, we are in the 21st century. How come, right, that you and I, all of us, can hop on a Zoom call at no cost to us and having this wonderful discussion, having calls with our families and loved ones at no cost, but incarcerated individuals and their families and resource providers have to spend so much money just to stay connected. It cannot be, right, that we still allow this to happen in the 21st century. And so we started building technology to really combat that status quo. So fast forward 5.5 years, we're now serving 63 facilities in 15 states. The total number of folks who have utilized our platform, maintained connection, is about 181,000. We have three, for lack of a better word, product lines. There's Ameelio Connect, which is the communication suite. There's Ameelio Learn, which enables educators, reentry providers to provide resources. And then there is hardware, so basically tablets or Chromebooks that folks can utilize inside I can talk a little bit more about why the three product lines, they're really born out of necessity. There are so many challenges facing folks who want to connect with the outside world, and a lot of those things that we develop out of, really demand from our users. Our mission here really is to, I think, as all nonprofit, work ourselves out of a job. Um, I think that so far, our hope is that, you know, people who are inside can connect with the outside resources of their loved ones at no cost, as freely as you and I can. And so, we choose to advance that goal by building accessible, affordable, modern, quality technology. But we won't really stop until that goal is reached. But ideally, we'll stop sometime soon. And then also, yeah, how I came to this work. I am an economist by training. I'm fortunate to not have families or friends incarcerated, but I do remember when I was at the University of Chicago Research Center, that was when the co-founders of Ameelio approached us and asking us to do an impact evaluation and the causal link, right? The theory of change being when people are connected with their loved ones, the best parts of their lives, they will re-enter better. And that sounds to me like a duh. Like obviously people will, re-enter better if they are connected to hope. But that was what drew me to the organization and this work. But I think also my personal experience immigrating to the United States, trying to connect with my families and friends back home really highlights to me the value of staying connected and the difficulty as well. I think we as immigrants face a lot of the similar challenges when it comes to technology, when it comes to cost. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But to me, connection is the most important thing to maintaining that hope and maintaining yourself. And so, yeah, really excited to be, joining this conversation, working on this very important issue. And then I think it will take a lot of work for us to get to that final goal, but we're just getting started.
Thank you so much, all three of y'all. I think that April, you actually set us up really nicely for what I want to start us off in terms of our discussion tonight, by talking about how it's this connection to hope that's so important. But I guess I want to just back up and think about like what are the different layers of importance? Like, there's so many different benefits and different reasons that staying in contact with the wider world, with friends and family, even with, news and stuff that's happening on the outside. So I just wanted to kind of start there. Like, why is it important for people who are incarcerated to have that pathway for connection? And we can kind of start wherever, whoever wants to jump in with that.
I could I could jump in first. I see it obviously, like you said, many different reasons, many different levels. One, as April like touched on, for reentry, connection is really a necessity because education and sustained contact with people on the outside helps foster connection and also helps people build the skills and confidence needed to navigate life after release, especially when it comes to work, relationships, long-term stability, all different reasons. Um, but at the same time, I believe just as strongly that connection and education is necessary for people who might never leave prison. So I think it's important for people of every custody level classification. I've worked with people in max on death row, and I've seen, firsthand how important education and connection itself is for those people in those classifications because outside connection is not only about reentry, but it's about building a life and identity, a sense of purpose for people behind the walls through these means of correspondence. And then also more broadly, I think maintaining connection is an active way to push back against the system that's inherently designed to dehumanize, isolate, and conceal. And that's why facilities make it so hard to maintain lines of connection with people inside because it's intentionally built to keep them isolated, So connection, especially through something as tangible and tactile as handwritten mail, asserts a sense of presence and care in a space that's intentionally built to deny those things from people housed there. So, in a sense, correspondence isn't just communication, but it's also a form of resistance. So that's why it's so important for everyone inside.
I can probably, share a little bit of things that we've heard from our users, just, contextualize on the story. I remember when we first started providing, video calls in Iowa Department of Corrections, we'll be talking with our users and then kind of witness that first time when they see someone that they love on video. And I think those are stories that still stay with me till this date. Um, we saw grandparents who are lifers seeing their grandchildren for the first time. And the light really, like in folks' eyes, when they actually see that there is a life, right, like on the outside, and they are able to meet really their families for the first time. And that was something that was really empowering for our users. And then we also had, young men basically made a mistake and get incarcerated in the state prison in Iowa. And for the first time through video calls, we're seeing that their parents had preserved their bedrooms, right? Like in a sense, like they didn't repurpose the bedroom. They, had it the same, uh, you know, 2 years after that they got arrested and incarcerated. And you can see something changed in their heads, right? Of like, oh yeah, I have a place to go home. And it hasn't changed since I left. And then people seeing their dogs and cats and pets basically for the first time and seeing that joy on their face. Like to me, we talk with our users about their experience knowing that there are families out there, and then we also talk with the correctional officers who were, staffing the visiting room, seeing the change in the lives of the incarcerated individuals. And then we talk to the correctional staff about how much they now have hope as well for better reentry for the folks that are under custody. And so those are, just some of the, I guess, qualitative or anecdotal stories that we hear. But even from like a quantitative perspective, we know that maintaining family connection reduce recidivism by up to 56%. And then access to educational opportunities can reduce recidivism by 45%. Look, those are not, small numbers. And so for us, right, like one of the things that we think about is mass incarceration is really expensive for the country. Where I'm based in Boston. I think that the numbers that we always see is it takes about 35,000 a year to educate a student in Boston Public School, which is one of the best public schools in the country, but it takes 156,000 to incarcerate a person in Massachusetts. And if you put those numbers into perspective, even from a utilitarian perspective, it's absolutely necessary to do everything that you can to reduce recidivism rate and making sure that people are not reoffending, and maintaining connection is one of the most effective tools to do just that.
Thank you. Marlies, could you maybe speak a little bit about your context is a little unique. It represents kind of what we often think of as the most extreme form of incarceration. So in that context, why is staying connected so important for folks in solitary?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. And of course, like this discussion doesn't focus around the the numbers or the specifics of what solitary confinement means, but um, the psychological effects are permanent and they're widespread and they affect you forever. And it's just incredibly damaging and a very cruel form of torture. And so actually, I have a couple of letters here that I just pulled out. I have like obviously like probably just us two like stacks and shoe boxes full of letters. And these are just general letters asking for pen pals, nothing out of the ordinary, but I just thought maybe the words would help illustrate. I won't include anyone's name, but this man is 29 years old. I've been in solitary confinement for 2 years now, which is unbelievable. And I really don't have anyone on the outside to write to, so I'm writing this and requesting a pen pal. It really don't matter as long as they'll stay in touch with me and make my time go by quicker. Please assign me a pen pal. Thank you for your time. I want to talk about the time piece in a little bit. And this next letter, he already has a pen pal, and he's actually requesting a pen pal for his friend who's also in solitary, and communication between people in solitary, like on the in the same unit is another very fascinating topic that we probably don't have time to get into. But correspondence between people inside is also so interesting, especially when they're not allowed to in solitary. Um, but I really like the way this guy writes. I would like to thank you for your services. Being able to connect with someone outside of this atmosphere has helped me greatly while dealing with the regular problems of continued isolation. Because of the success with your services, I've spread the word of your organization adamantly. This brings me to my purpose for writing. I would like to sign a buddy up of mine for your services. His name is, and he's 31 years old. He's been having issues coping with isolation, and I believe having someone to speak to, correspond with, would help him greatly. Which I just find is really touching because, you know, the someone's ability to reach outside of themselves even in this moment is like so beautiful, and also radical, right? Like the like organizing person to person is amazing, and that kind of support when the support is really not there. And this last letter says, prison is a strange place, a very lonely place. My experience is it's a place designed to make people locked in it incommunicado. Surely being able to meet and correspond with someone other than with other prisoners would brighten my days. So a pen pal, if you can help me find one, would be much appreciated. So I don't know, those just were like those are just three examples of letters requesting pen pals, and um, letters from people inside are always really hard for me to read, even though that's my job. But they're really hard for me to read, and I haven't been incarcerated and haven't been in solitary, but I've sort of understood a few key things, like specifically drawn from my conversations with people, in terms of the impact of letters or what it does to you, what incarceration does to you. And as I said, the impact of solitary is huge. The psychological effect is huge. Obviously, we're talking about damage, neurological damage, but we're also talking about self-harm. And so, in general population, some of the deprivations of incarceration are mitigated through social contact, right? People can still talk with each other and deepen relationships. You can make friends inside. Your days are difficult, but they're structured. So through activities or meals or the different ways you interact with other people, time isn't your own, but it's understood and felt. There's a structure to the day. Freedom isn't your own, but a sense of self can kind of remain intact through your relationships. Um, but in solitary, time is meaningless. It's completely lost. You're lost in time. You might not have any idea what day it is, what time it is. You're just alone with your thoughts. So, this is one of the reasons out of many that this is so profoundly harmful and makes you go crazy. And we don't have, again, time. April and Jess made such amazing points about recidivism. I mean, talk about recidivism from solitary. It's so damaging, and you're not setting anyone up for success, to say the least. But this lost in time, like letters can interrupt this. It can't make solitary better. Nothing can, except for just eradicating it completely. But they can restore a sense of self and a sense of social identity through communicating with someone else. In writing letters to someone and in building a relationship with that person, someone in solitary can totally reject the social identity that's been imposed on them, criminal or inmate or worthless, and claim other identities. They can reject that loss of self. And they can also give a sense of time when time is taken away. I mean, there is a time when letters come, and that's the time of your day when a letter comes. It makes you feel more ordered. The letters can restructure your relationship to your own experience. So if you're just lost in your head thinking about what's going on around you, you're totally inward. But when you write about something, you can claim it as yours. You can describe your physical world, no matter how small it is. You can map it and let someone else into it. You can sort of claim it. You can develop your voice and you can describe things. So I think in that way, from everything I've understood and seen and learned, with letters, you realize you have a right to self-expression and a right to imagination and a right to a soul, really.
Thanks, Marlies. I want to loop in Audrey. We're so glad that you were able to get on here. We're so happy to have you as part of this conversation. And so we've just been talking about, all of these different reasons that staying connected is important. And all three of y'all brought up great points about the impact that staying connected has both at the time and for later on. But Audrey, I would love if you could share a little bit about why you found that staying connected, in your experience was so important and vital, while you were serving on the inside.
Sure. So the thing about connection, whether it's a phone call, a letter, it helps with the isolation and it helps with you not feeling as lonely because you can be incarcerated and be surrounded by a whole group of people and feel just a sense of profound loneliness. So to be able to connect with family, to be able to connect with friends, whether it was a phone call, whether it was a letter, makes you feel that you're still connected. It also, to a large extent, gives you hope because if you're sitting inside and you don't have any connection to anyone for whatever reason, it becomes that much easier to lose hope. And hope is a very elusive thing for people that are incarcerated. So that connection, and like you had the one panelist that talked about mail, like everyone knows when the mail comes. And unfortunately, in many circumstances, mail also becomes a way to maintain power because we could watch the officer walk in with the mailbag and we know what the mailbag looks like. It looks like the same mailbag that we've been looking at for years. And they'll say to you, mail didn't come. And some officers want to give you the mail right away because they want you to go read your mail and leave them alone. And some, it becomes, a power trip. The kiosks and like JPay or whichever vendor is currently, has helped some because the world moves fast. Not everyone wants to write a letter. So it's easier for them to, quick bang out an email versus sitting down and writing a letter. You lose some of the personal with the electronic because you're not seeing the person's handwriting, but it's a level of connection, especially like during COVID, where it's a little faster. It's faster than mail. I don't know. Sorry, the tech issues prior to. If you discussed like groups like Pigeonly, where mail, so like I was incarcerated, so I've spent time inside with contact, and I'm now home reaching out to friends that are still inside. Now there's these third party where I'm not even mailing my mail to my friend. I'm mailing it to a third party that opens it, makes a photocopy, and sends the photocopy. So, parents that really loved getting drawings from their kids, or, my boyfriend was an artist and he would send me things. Now you're not even getting that. You're getting a photocopy and it's not as tangible.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that what this really points to with all of y'all's examples is that when we think about staying connected, there are these like layers of benefit to the individual and to like to them as a person and the safety. This didn't really come up, I guess, in our conversation thus far, but it is one of those opportunities where you're able to demonstrate that people do care about you on the outside and that someone will notice if something happens to you. And I think that that layer is on top of all of these other layers that we've already, been discussing. So if we know that it's super important and all of us can agree that, this is a clear, vital need that humans have of staying connected, let's turn to some of the barriers, and I think Audrey, you've kind of addressed one now that's kind of emerged of this, third party and the further distance, and all of these different ways that it becomes less and less personal. What are some of the other barriers that folks on the inside, or their families and friends on the outside have to maintaining that level of contact?
think one of the biggest ones is cost. You and I talked yesterday about, New Jersey has switched their provider for emails. So where I used to be able to buy a stamp or two for 40 cents, now I'm left with putting at least $25 on the account to be able to communicate. And not every family member has that. Um, I can remember, and you have population too of individuals that have been incarcerated for a considerable amount of time. Getting used to using the kiosk, getting used to using the tablets was difficult for some people, and that's even added to the fact of, you know, computers are not cheap. So does a family even have that access? Yes, they have phones, but it's not the same.
I'll just jump in here because I think that what Audrey said is so on point, like from a provider perspective, right? Like the kind of challenges that we saw are really layered. And the most important thing that we saw is cost, right? So I know that there has been a lot of different, efforts in the past decade trying to eliminate the cost burden, but with some of the recent policy changes, the cost burden got back up. And then I think that with cost, I'll just emphasize two things. One is that it really is costly, and then the cost is everywhere. Like it's not just, okay, 25 cents sending an email or 15 cents per minute video calls. It's also opening up the tablet. Like I think we were talking about this in the prep meeting for this panel, but I remember seeing in Hawaii Department of Corrections, a woman was showing me how much it costs to access the tablet. And then it's charged as per minute. And then the two of us tried to click the back button together. And that took a minute to actually go back. And I can see her account going down, like minute by
Mm-hmm.
minute. And so I think the cost is not just like, oh, communication costs money. It's anything access to technology costs money. And that to me is just completely exploitative, right? Because we're also talking about a population that makes what, 1/10 of minimum wage. And so when it comes to that, a lot of that will go to the burden on the families. And these are also families that some of them don't have that money. So I think cost is number one. And two, Audrey also mentioned, but technology, when we're trying to deploy software and hardware, one thing that we always see is that there is dilapidated technology infrastructure inside. So even if you can afford the calls and you are using a tablet to make a call, the internet is bad. And so the calls are dropping every single 5 minutes. That is not a good experience, and that does not yield to meaningful connection with your loved ones. What we also saw is shortage of correctional staff. Obviously, a lot of times these communication needs to be monitored. And then when, let's take Bob. Bob is, in charge of monitoring calls. If Bob is not on the job that day, then no calls is happening. And so I do think the shortage of correctional staff in the end harms, right? Like the availability of connection inside. And then sometimes people just have no connection. I think we're talking about this, like I remember going to Cook County Jail in Illinois and then asking um, folks there if they have family members to connect with. And they're like, I have no idea. And so I think this is why some of the work that you all are doing on the panel is really incredibly important because when people don't have that connection, how can we give them connection, right? Like how can we have people that they can trust and stay in contact with? And then the very last thing I'll say is neglect. And I think this is so important because it kind of fuels number one to four, right? Where as a system, like we don't pay a lot of attention to both those who are in prisons and jails. Like I'll take myself, like I used to work in government technology and information technology services in city governments. And I will say that, we will be wiring schools, libraries, and homeless shelters, halfway housing. But if you ask me, how is it in prisons and jails in my own locality? I have no idea. Like, I don't know who wires them. I don't know how it is right now. So I think the systematic, like, neglect that both from our public sector, but also from you and me, right? Like folks who don't might not have that experience is what fuels this invisible system of exploitation really getting worse and worse and basically operating under impunity. And so, which is really ironic when you think about, this is a place where you're supposed to hold people accountable. And so I think all of that are challenges, but in my opinion, they have, right, like there's a layered approach to it. And so when we think about addressing that, I also think about, how do we prioritize tackling each of those barriers?
I think so. Obviously, the emphasis on the digital mail issues is extremely important because that's becoming increasingly popular in facilities as physical mail is being banned. Like Audrey said, now I would say the majority of facilities now rely on these third-party systems where you have to send mail to different even states to have it scanned and photocopied to people inside. Um, but as someone who does like mail every day and gets hundreds and hundreds of envelopes, as many new letters that we get, we also get so much return to sender mail. And I think that's something that's not talked about often, but that I think alone shows the censorship and deliberate practices that facilities partake in to disrupt these lines of communication, right? So mail rules, it's not universal for all facilities. They're very arbitrary, they're inconsistently enforced, and so letters are very frequently rejected and returned with little to no explanation. And then these rejections can hinge on like details like number of pages per envelope, or the color of the envelope, or the color of the paper, or even the type of ink used on an envelope. Just last week, I got a letter returned because it said gel pen, but a gel pen wasn't even used. But it got returned because they claimed that the person put the address with a gel pen. So it's just these very arbitrary rules that disrupt, mail. And then when mail is sent back, people on the outside are left trying to guess why it got returned because sometimes the people in the mailroom will write a reason, whether that reason is correct or not. You never know because sometimes they'll just check like a random because there's like a stamp they'll put and they'll have different reasonings, and sometimes they'll just check a random one that doesn't apply to that envelope. Um, so we're left guessing, why it got returned, whether if it was a rule that was violated or if someone got moved to a different facility, because that happens very often. People in prisons get moved around a lot, and then you could lose contact. And sometimes you can't like relocate them in the state database, so you have to wait till they can reach out to you. So you have all these gaps in correspondence that's caused by like infinite amount of factors, and so these disruptions cause delays and confusion that can stretch weeks or months. And then when physical mail is banned or repeatedly rejected, people are then funneled into these financially exploitative digital email systems with no alternative. So they're forced to pay these high costs, or they're forced to get this technology they might not be comfortable using or can afford to get. And so what gets framed as convenience or security or safety through these digital platforms, in practice, it's really just a pay to communicate model that only deepens inequality and isolation. So they do have some benefit with the speed and efficiency for some, but there's also the huge list of exploitation that goes into these systems as well.
Go off. I'm like, what do I have to say after all of this? I mean, yeah, I'll just add a little bit. Um, this is such a big part of my job is to deal with the tedium of the letters being sent back and trying to troubleshoot. It's like so tedious, and you realize how bureaucracy can be designed to be so boring and evil at the same time, and people on the outside and on the inside bear the brunt of this because prisons are created not just to keep people inside, but also to keep people outside. So we want, people on the outside not to come in and vice versa. So it's really affecting everyone. And again, no one is more inside than someone in solitary. And there's so many barriers. So many were mentioned already, but especially with snail mail, the regulations, in my experience, have only increased year after year. The tablets and kiosks have been mentioned by all of us. I think it's 23 states now that have the digitized mail systems. So where they receive the mail, you don't send it to the prison, you send it to this other third party system, sometimes in a whole different state. They like photocopy it. It's like the most boring, evil job. Like it's so boring and so evil. It drives me bananas. And you know, and then people either get like a physical copy, like a really sort of wish-washy, did like, you know, black and white copy, fading copy, or they get a copy on their tablet. But um, you know, so many people in solitary can't have tablets, and so their mail just can't get to them. And physical letters are read, they're delayed, they're censored, they're rejected. Minor technicalities. The gel pen thing is making me feel crazy, Jess. That's so crazy. In many, if not most states, you can't send a letter that's not like white envelope, white paper, blue or black ink. You know, no postcards, no stationery, no stickers. And it's like, you know, when I'm onboarding outside pen pals, it's sad to tell them they want to draw. They're excited about the postcards they're going to send. They're excited about. I just got an email today being like, I can't send stickers. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you can't. So, you know, you're going to get a letter back, and yeah, it's really hard because on the inside, people are wondering what's going on. Am I ever going to get my letter? Did they forget about me? And on the outside, you know, we're wondering what happened, and there's really no way to track it. Um, and also people, I think someone mentioned this, but people are often transferred without like any notice from prison to prison within a state, and letters are not forwarded to the new address. So you just have to send like an entirely new letter. And and yeah, and I mean, this was mentioned in the comments and you know, by the panelists, but the state is threatened. The state regulates relationality because they know that social interaction and relationships are the quickest way to make someone feel like a human, and making someone feel like a human is not the primary goal of a prison.
Thank you for that, like mic drop ending, Miley's. And I think that all of these barriers really point to some like systemic issues that are about the way that the system is designed. So I think often we talk about how it's not that the system isn't working properly, it's that it is, and that a lot of these barriers are, um, you know, kind of tinged with intent and with the desire to keep meaningful connection from happening. So I appreciate all of the concerns and issues that y'all raised. What I'm going to do now is, since we do have four panelists coming from really different perspectives on this, I've got a question for each of y'all that I'm going to pose. I do want to make sure that we leave some time for audience Q&A because I've already seen some great ones coming in. But Audrey, I want to start with you. I was hoping that you might talk to us a little bit about how the experience of staying connected and communicating has changed over time. We've hit on this a little bit with the tablet conversation, but how has this, like, what impact does it have when you're either on the inside or on the outside trying to communicate with folks on the inside to have this kind of ever-changing system with new rules coming up all the time? Audrey, I think you're muted.
Sorry. So when I first was incarcerated over 30 years ago, we were doing snail mail. And snail mail, they didn't care what color ink, they didn't care if there were stickers, they didn't care if it was drenched in perfume, and everyone couldn't wait for mail. When and then we watched it progressively, no perfume, no gel pens, no colored paper, and then we had the rise of, you know, JPay, because that was the system I was using. And JPay helped in some ways to make communication faster. Um, or, you know, I had friends that were like, I'm not going to write you a letter, but now that I can email you, it's fine. But JPay and those systems, you know, are also very used to control. So just recently, Monday, I was supposed to have a video visit with a friend of mine. Sunday night, it was canceled. No reason, no explanation. I've lived experience. I had a rough idea that, okay, it's the bad weather, and this means my friend is going to be locked in her cell all day. So there was that. The tech for me was tough in the beginning because I had been locked up for so long. It took a while for me to get used to it. Didn't know what the word touch screen meant, so couldn't figure out why I couldn't log in. But like there were things when you're incarcerated and you're writing a letter and you want to tell your friend about something that maybe shouldn't necessarily be saying in a letter, there's ways to put it in the letter. With the rise of like JPay and Securus and all this, you have to learn how to creatively spell, because something as simple as, oh, I went to the doctor and they prescribed whatever medication. And I'm not even talking about a narcotic medication. I'm talking about a medication will get that whole entire email flagged. So now I've emailed my friend who happens to be a former nurse and said, hey, saw the doctor. This is what they gave me. And I'm wondering why she's not answering. And my friend who knew I was supposed to be going to the doctor is now thinking, why is she not telling me what happened? So you learn to creatively spell stuff. You learn to ways around it. Because it's always been that. It's always been they will do stuff to control, and we find ways around it because you have to find ways around it in order to try to just survive and maintain some level of humanity, which is not really easy. Even like the response. So I'm trying to be able to go back in to visit my one friend. They will not clear me to go inside. I work here at the Petey Greene Program. I'm pretty much the poster child for successful reintegration, and I cannot get cleared. And the response was, well, we've given you video visits. Be thankful for that because we can take those away too. How do you argue that? Because I spend time in, I know how important communication is. I know, because you make friends when you're inside. And then they go home and life happens, and I respect that, and they fall off. So the longer you're doing, the fewer your outside connections are.
Thank you for sharing that, Audrey. I don't have a good transition for this.
Yes.
But Marlies, I know that Solitary Watch has some related projects that go beyond the Pen Pal program. And so I was hoping that you might tell us about one of those projects, the photo requests from Solitary.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna share my screen in a moment, so just let me know if it's not working. But Photo Request from Solitary is another project under our umbrella. I've worked on it on and off over the past 15 years. It's an amazing project. So we spent a few years sending people request forms by snail mail, asking them if you could see a photo of anything, what would you like to see? This is specifically people in solitary. And they'll mail the request form back with a description of something like, I want to see a picture of my grandmother's house in upstate New York, or a sunset over the ocean, or a photo of my son in the sky with Mickey Mouse, anything. And a volunteer photographer or graphic designer would design it or take the photograph, and we'd send it back to them. And I have a few examples here that I'll just show just to give you a sense really quickly. Can you guys see this?
Not yet.
What? Why not?
There we go.
Yeah? Yes, thank goodness. Okay, so this is our request form. This person requests a winter night scene with a full moon shining off the snow, trees in the background, and a pack of gray wolves standing just outside the trees in the snow. And their pack leader is an all-white wolf on a plateau howling at the full moon. To me, wolves represent freedom, and so does the wilderness. I just want the photograph to represent freedom. And I'll just show you what that looks like. I just really, really like this image. It's been the background to my phone for like a decade. I just think it's so beautiful. Um, and this person says, I would like to see a man getting released from prison with $40 in his pocket, with no family and no support, after doing so many years in prison, confused with himself and don't know which road to choose to survive out there in the world. It ain't easy with $10 in your pocket and going to shelter with more drugs in a shelter than there is in the streets. So in other words, there's many roads in front of you to choose from, whether they're good or bad. For example, this is the roads that are presented to you when you leave prison. So he sort of draws it out. Lonely, confused, no money, no hope. It's a big thing for a human being getting released of prison, especially from the SHU. The SHU is the special housing unit, which is another word for solitary. And I would just want to say right here that so many people get released, like there's no step down program. So many people get released directly from solitary to like Port Authority in New York City, where I live. I can't imagine anything more traumatizing than that. And so, and a smooth reentry is probably not going to be there. But okay, so this photograph is right here. I thought that was a pretty beautiful one. And then finally, the last one. I would like to have a painting of the outdoors, maybe a wooded scene with maybe a doe and twin fawns. This is very heartbreaking. Anything would be appreciated. I've been locked away since 1983. Very difficult to read, but also a very beautiful image that a graphic designer sort of created using a photograph. So I'll just stop sharing. Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, so we send this inside to people, but it's also an incredibly powerful tool when you do outreach or legislative lobbying. To see someone's writing like that, like tangibly, is so unbelievable. I think Jess was talking about like the tactile experience of like looking at letters and like, yeah, it reminds you, oh wow, these are people. And I think the letters and the photos have something in common, which is that they both allow someone to sort of escape the experience of the cell. Like your mind can go elsewhere, can fixate elsewhere. Like I don't want to romanticize these photos or these letters in any way. Obviously, the escape is tiny and it's not much compared to what people are facing, but it does, in terms when I was saying about projecting yourself outwards by claiming your experience, by writing to someone, by um, imagining something different, your mind can sort of dream or fantasize or think about something else or someone else and see something else and see something other than the walls of your 6x9 cell day after day.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really cool project that y'all are working on, and something that I think is really powerful as this tool of looking at like what does a lack of connection lead people to like desire and kind of need out of that. So, April, I want to turn to Ameelio for a second. You've talked a little bit about kind of the technology and of the connections part with the family and friends and loved ones. But you mentioned at the beginning that you'll have these other product lines. And since here at the Petey Greene Program, we focus on educational justice and providing that educational support, I was hoping you might tell us a little bit about how Ameelio is connecting incarcerated folks to educational opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So I should talk a little bit first about how and why even we develop these other product lines, because for me, it's the most organic way of incorporating user feedback. So basically what happened is we really focused on communication between family members and incarcerated folks. And then we deployed in Iowa, Department of Corrections, across all the state prisons. And then a few months into the deployment, like as in before we even really stabilized the technology and all of that, the community colleges in Iowa reached out to us and was like, hey, we understand that there is this no cost connection right now inside the state prisons. We already provide programs inside. We already provide classes, but right now it's all in person. Can we actually use your platform to communicate with our students? And it was really powerful because we were like, well, yes, short answer is yes. But if we truthfully, right, like take a look at our platform, it's specifically designed for families, not educators. Like the platform itself did not at that point allow, for example, an educator to have a whiteboard, right, experience or a virtual classroom experience. It's not designed for education. And so, I'm very grateful for our engineering team who I I know this is being broadcasted, so hopefully our engineering team will see this and feel good about it. But I think a lot of our engineers had a midlife crisis when they're, working in Silicon Valley, whatever edu technology, big companies, and think, let me do something meaningful with my life. And so they're really incredible engineers who basically spun off our Ameelio Learn, the education platform, very quickly for the Iowa educators. But because of that, right, like we really started with a co-design process with the users. And so we're like, well, as educators, like what would you like to see? Like what would be helpful for you when you're trying to reach your incarcerated learners? And so for Ameelio Learn, there is virtual classroom. There is also a learning management system that we heard from educators outside that they don't want to relearn something that they haven't, right? So it's like they want to utilize the learning management system that they're already using in their community colleges. And that's why we chose Canvas essentially as the backbone of the LMS, so that people who learn LMS inside and outside don't have to relearn it when they come out and get released. And so those are kind of the ways that from a technology perspective, we develop platforms to sustain that communication and connection between educators and their learners. Specifically, we have deployed Ameelio Learn in all the facilities that we currently serve, and we see people use it differently, right? So folks who are in state prisons tend to go towards adult basic education, sometimes preparing for their GED courses. And we do see, right, educators having more access and time available really with their learners. Either it's through the virtual classroom or even mentoring experience. We almost got started on a project with the Petey Greene Program in Idaho and Utah, providing mentoring sessions to the incarcerated individuals in those two states. We also see kids using it very differently. Sometimes they have educational games as well on it, and so they can, really play and learn at the same time. I think one thing I will say, because of the way that our education platform is developed, our philosophy has always been local educators and resource providers know what's best inside. And so we don't want to, we're not honestly in the best position to curate what's good for folks who are in a particular state or jurisdiction. And so we designed the platform in a way that is very easily customizable. And so what it really looks like is, let's say we're providing services in Massachusetts. We'll first go into the prison or the jail. We ask folks there, what do they want to see? Like, what do they want to make available on the platform? And what are the local community colleges or groups that they already trust and already provide resources? So what we heard, right, is, for example, in Massachusetts, Boston Public Library is a huge resource for a lot of folks. There is ebooks, movies, and then also just, general things that are available to every single Massachusetts resident, including those who are in the facilities. And so we will then work with the community organizations to make their resources available on our platform instead of, curating things that we're not experts of. And so that's kind of, a unique part about our education offering and kind of why we had that philosophy. It's because it was really a response to what our users needed. And so we co-designed that with the users in mind at the center.
Yeah, thank you. I think that this actually does transition, link to what I'd like, Jess, for you to talk about, this connection between knowing the needs of both the incarcerated person and the person on the outside, and how to make sure that whatever programming or project is in place meets the needs of both of those people. And so I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about the specifics of the mentorship program at Penn America and how that shapes both sides of this partnership and this writing kind of program.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, the mentorship program is basically when we pair one writer on the inside with one writer on the outside, and we facilitate their one-on-one mail correspondence. We have over 100 participants in the program right now. Some are newer pairings, some have been writing to each other since longer than I've been at Penn, like, or even way before that. But one of the most important aspects of the program, and I think the core of it, um, is the belief that the mentee-mentor relationship is mutual and reciprocal. So we don't see mentors as the experts and the incarcerated, mentees as the students, really, but we understand mentorship as a two-way exchange of insight, guidance, and creative work across the walls, where both writers share their work, ask questions, learn from one another. And we hear again and again through, program feedback that these relationships change how both people understand their creative lives and just like life in general. So writers on the inside express how they feel seen and taken seriously as artists and writers. And then mentors often say that the relationship shapes how they think about their own writing, about how to engage their communities and responsibilities. And a lot of them are even like professors, so they'll bring in some of the work from the mentees into their classes. So it really is a mutual exchange. The only real difference is that mentors have more access. They have the internet, they have resources they could print and send in. So you can't like dismantle the power dynamic completely just based on access. But in terms of how the correspondence is intended to go, it is a mutual two-way exchange where both parties are learning equally from one another. And this dynamic is really embodied through our PEN America Langle Raman Prize for Mentorship that we administer every year. So the prize is named for Madeline Langle. She's the author of A Wrinkle in Time, and her decade-long written friendship with Ahmed Rahman. He's a Black Panther Party leader who did 21 years inside, and then upon his release, he became a beloved professor. And Langle and Rahman had a very special relationship through correspondence. And Langle was one of the program's first mentors, and her correspondence with Rahman really showed what's possible when mentorship is grounded in that reciprocity and care. And so, to honor the relationship and the core principles of the program, we award 4 current mentorship pairings with this award every year. And as part of the process, mentees and mentors write letters on each other's behalf, reflecting on their relationship and what they've learned, through their experience in the program. And all of their letters are published on PEN America's website, so you could take a look. And when reading them, you really can feel the depth of connection and mutual growth that develops through their sustained correspondence. And I just want to read one of the brief excerpts from one of the mentees' letters who won last year, because I think it captures, again, what the program really means. And so she writes, with that first letter, my mentor had made me feel comfortable and invited me to share a bit of my personal story with her. As I had hoped, there was a genuine acceptance. Shared experiences reconnects us to an environment beyond the fences that confine not only our bodies, but in many ways, our hearts and our minds. Giving me the freedom to write with an open heart and mind has helped me reach beyond the barriers of steel and razor wire and of my own making. She has helped me find the confidence within myself to want to publish my work someday. So I just thought that captured really beautifully the heart of the program and why we do what we do. And then lastly, because I'm mindful of our time as well, in addition to the awards, we also offer other opportunities for program participants to connect them to the broader literary community, both inside and outside of prison. And one way we do that is every April, we participate in National Poetry Writing Month, where you write 30 poems in 30 days. And we encourage program participants to send us their poems at the end of the month, and we publish it in a zine. So this is the zine from last year. The cover was actually designed by an artist in Alabama. He cuts up pieces of the New Yorker, and he makes these beautiful collages with just any materials he could find. This one was made on the back of like a Honey Buns cardboard box, and he used to send me all of them just like as gifts. And I said, this would be perfect for the cover. Can I use it? We commissioned his art for this. And I'm really proud of how this came out. And so what I love about this project specifically is that we accept writing from all different levels, right? So you could see a full range of voices and styles and creative development all in one zine. And many writers share how affirming it is to see their work published and hold a tangible result of this collaborative project that essentially becomes a marker of community and belonging. So these are just a few examples of possibilities within the mentorship program. It is like literary based, but like I said, of course, relationships develop from the letters, and you never know where the correspondence is going to go. And even just the pairing process itself, like it's fun but also intimidating, because you want to make sure like you have a good match, but you don't know how it's going to go until the letters actually start. So, and pairings that you might feel are not like you wouldn't think they would go together. They end up being like the most successful pairing. So it's just interesting to see. It's like one of my favorite things that we do. But yeah, I think overall, like I said, the mentorship program really is about that mutual exchange and just validating each other's experiences and learning and growing together through correspondence.
Thanks, Jess. I'm going to turn to a couple of questions in the chat and the Q&A, and we actually have two that I'm guessing, Marlies, are kind of directed at you, but feel free, anyone who wants to jump in. But both Kelsey and Michael are interested in any advice on how to kind of get started on this pen pal type of program, what some of the potential risks and considerations around either ethical concerns or more like practical logistical concerns on how you get this kind of thing set up.
Yeah, for sure. Those are really beautiful questions. So, uh, there are some like sort of logistics around the program that I didn't mention. One is that we um, we only welcome volunteers who are 21 years old and older. It used to be 18, but then we became mindful that a lot of people who wanted and were excited about this issue when they were 18, 19, they might not have been really ready for entering into that kind of pen pal relationship. And so now it's 21 and older. But we do a very sort of thorough job in terms of trying to onboard people and also um, protect privacy. So one of the unique things about the Pen Pal project is, and it's kind of clunky, but it is a way to protect privacy, and we found it's easier and better than anything else we've tried, which is that we offer volunteers on the outside a PO box. So I'm a volunteer. I write to John in Texas. John in Texas writes back to me via the PO box, and then our team is are the only people who have your real address, and then they would forward it on to me. It just takes maybe like 2 or 3 extra days. Um, and we also require everyone to use the last name alias. They can use their first name, but the last name alias is also important. So it's just sort of allows people, especially people who are really new to this work and to these issues, a very sort of safe and kind of easy onboarding for understanding, how do I talk to someone in prison, and there are a lot of questions that I get, like, can I talk about the vacation I took? I feel so bad, and I somehow love that question because I think there's a really beautiful answer. But yeah, so we have guidelines that we send to people inside. They can't be on our waiting list until they read and signed the guidelines, send them back to us, and then we have guidelines that we send to people outside. Same thing. They don't sign it, but I have the email confirmation that they've read them. And it's just sort of a way that where it's the only, I think, pen pal project in the country that does solitary for anyone, or that's open to people who are in solitary, but all kinds of solitary. And also the only one that provides this kind of service. We've had this PO box for years and years. And so um, also what I really love about it is that the program feels really accessible to people who are not necessarily boots on the ground activists or people who have been involved in this forever, people who are disabled or elders who are at home most of the time and but like really wanting to get connected, people who are not so used to working in this kind of field. I find it really accessible, and I get a lot of different people excited to be a part of it, from all different walks of life and fields. So that's sort of what we do. And I'd be happy to speak to any of your students, or to give some sort of Zoom meeting or talk about solitary.
Thanks. We've got a question for April, and this is a little bit of a technical one, but I think it's interesting. But Simone, I think I'm saying that right. Sorry if I didn't. Writes, I wrote about audio technology infrastructures in prisons for my dissertation, and I was left with questions about the ways in which audio quality informs the sensation of connection. Have you
Mm.
found that this is an emphasis for the companies that hold monopolies? How about for Ameelio?
That's a great question. So for the monopolies, I would say No. And I think partially is because it's actually perverse incentive, right? Because the way that a lot of well, two of the duopolies or two of the companies that host the monopoly, the way that they charge is by the minute, and actually sometimes there is a connection fee. So if the call keeps dropping, right, like and then you have to reconnect again and again, then they actually get more money out of it. And so I would say that it has an impact and it's a perverse incentive. Um, the other thing that we see is the quality of the audio call depends on obviously the software, but also the infrastructure upon which the call is happening, right? So if the network quality is bad, again, then the call will drop and there will be freezing. And so for Ameelio, this is the best part I think about being a nonprofit. Like we are held accountable by our board and our funders on the quality of the calls, right? And so we will have to figure out ways, even in the face of like pretty dilapidated infrastructure, how can we make the call quality high? And you're right, like there are technical ways to do it. For example, like our engineers like design the system in a way that even if the internet connection drops momentarily, we will not close the call. So basically, if the bandwidth is small, right, like or is low, a lot of times in commercially available video call or audio call software, it will drop. So basically, if your connection is bad, Zoom will close on you. Similar to me, if my connection is bad, Zoom will close on us. I think we've probably experienced that in our daily lives, but for us, we basically hold that time of disconnection on the software side longer than usual. That ensures if you're walking from one place to the other, if the connection drops somehow, the call itself won't just drop. And so there are technical ways to do it. The other way that we do, right, is advocating to the state and locality to have, again, I think we do the introduction in the beginning where I was very involved in advocating for prisons, jails, and juvenile facilities be classified as a community anchor institution in the infrastructure bill. And that enables them to access federal funding to improve their network infrastructure. And so you wouldn't have, right, like the frequency of calls dropping because of internet quality. The last thing I'll mention is for Ameelio, we're held accountable by our funders and our board on the quality. And in fact, I personally, right, like I actually have some of our team one-on-ones using Ameelio because I'm like, I would need to use the software and the service that we are providing to the incarcerated individuals. And if the quality is bad, I should be the first one to know. And so in our team one-on-one, we use Ameelio to communicate.
Thank you. It was a really fascinating question. I love where that went. I've got a last question. This is from an anonymous attendee. But how do you think restricted correspondence and the rise of tablets in prison impacts learning and education on the inside? And whoever wants to take this on, more than happy to.
I'll start. Just very obviously, it's so hard to get things inside because of the restrictions. Like even the sentences book, it's just a writing handbook. It covers all different genres. It's authored by 50 contributors, most of whom are justice impacted themselves. This book was banned in Florida, and people in Florida cannot get it. And so, and this is just a strictly educational resource, you know? And so that alone is just a concrete example of how they intentionally make it difficult. And these restrictions only help with that goal for them, you know? I think the justification for this was it has a potential to start a riot, which says a lot about education, you know? But yeah, so even again, like the material that the mentors send in, because we facilitate all the correspondence, so the mentors will upload materials through a Google form and I'll print and send it to the mentee. Um, a lot of it gets rejected for arbitrary reasons. And so just I see day to day how difficult that these restrictions make it. There is an app called Edovo that a lot of people have access to inside now. And from what I've heard, I haven't like seen it myself or used it myself, but from what I've heard, it's pretty successful. It has different like educational programs on it. I think it's fairly new. So I think there are efforts trying, to fix this, but the prisons just implement all these different regulations that make it extremely difficult just to get educational resources in, let alone like how do people use them. And so also with sentences, we developed the free write curriculum. We have two different versions. One is for facilitator led, so for people like outside teachers or whoever to go in and teach it. And then we also have a self-directed version where people inside can form their own groups and teach amongst themselves. But even that is prohibited in a lot of facilities, like forming groups with like your peers inside, like that. Sometimes that's just not allowed. So there are a lot of restrictions, and I think there are mechanisms of like trying to go about them, but it's like a battle after another, and you have to figure out why, because they don't explicitly say all the time what's allowed and what's not, and it changes also. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. So I do always like to leave a little bit of time for panelists to share any kind of links or ways to learn more about the work that you're doing or just more on this issue. If there are ways for the audience or the general public to kind of get involved or, help support the work that you're doing, please feel free to use the chat to do so. Marlies, did you have something?
If I just put it in the chat that I see, is that gonna work? It says host and panelists, but maybe it'll work.
Can you drop down? There
It'll
should
work?
be, I'll do it,
Oh,
actually,
the
I think.
drop down actually only includes
It's
us, I
because I'm
think.
the host. I will put the
Oh,
links in
thank
the chat
you.
in just a second.
Great.
So these will be some ways for y'all to kind of see a little bit more about the work that's happening that all of our panelists have been talking about today. And I do want to just take this moment to thank all of y'all so much. Audrey, April, Marlies, and Jess. This was fantastic. This is an amazing conversation. I really appreciate um, y'all taking the time to share your work. And I want to thank the audience. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your amazing questions. We really appreciate it. Just to kind of close us out, the work we do here at the Petey Greene Program is made possible through generous donations of individuals and groups who believe in our mission to bring high quality tutoring to incarcerated learners. So please consider donating to the organization or consider sharing the link to our donating page on your social media accounts to help signal boost the work we're doing here together. I know also that's true for Pen America, Solitary Watch, and Ameelio. We're all um, very much grateful for any financial support and also just spreading the word about the work that we do. And then finally, you all will receive a survey to provide feedback on tonight's webinar. I'm going to put it in the chat and it will go out via email afterwards. We really do value your input and we use it to inform our programming. So please take a couple of minutes to fill that out when you are able to. And just again, thank you for your attention and engagement tonight. Another thank you to our panelists. We greatly appreciate you sharing your insights, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This was so great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.